Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityarma Mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us, thou God, from unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace, peace be unto us all. Namaste. Welcome to Yoga for Health, Happiness and Liberation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we are very fortunate to have one of my friends and disciple, and he is also a great disciple of our Guru Swami Vishnudevananda Maharaj. His name is Gregg Hill, and his initiated name is Gopal. He goes by the name Gopal. He taught yoga for many years. He was the first person to teach yoga at the Smyrna prison. He was volunteering there, and he's an inspiration to me because he's very generous with the books. He gives them out. He used to buy books from Swami Shivananda, Swami Vishnudevananda, and give them out. And then he worked for DuPont for many years and just retired. And he has traveled all over the world, and he is a great yogi, and he teaches yoga. Also, he teaches massaging. He learned from Japan. So that is also he's doing, and right now he's going to tell you all about yoga. So I'm going to introduce Gopal and let him take over.
Hi, how are you doing today? My name is Gopal, and I originally went to Sally's in 1975, and I transferred down to Texas with DuPont, and then I had 14 days off a month, and I started a pain management clinic by myself, and I learned a lot. And my idea with the pain management clinic as far as yoga was to my teacher said, serve those in front of you one at a time. So I began with that, and I actually went into somebody's room. I did volunteer work in MD Anderson. It's the biggest cancer hospital in the world, and I would just sit on somebody's bed and talk to them. And some of the women might want their hair done or a wig after chemotherapy or something, and go out and get it. And then I was sitting on some lady's bed, and she had had her leg taken off a couple days before, and she said, when I get out of here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I said, I didn't notice that her leg was missing, and I said, well, you're going to have to walk the straight and narrow on that. And she started laughing. She said, well, it can't be too hard, I only have one leg. And I broke down, I started crying, and I really felt helpless. And it came to the point to where I could, work-wise, go to massage school. And then what happened was I have spent $140,000 in how to give a 1-hour massage. I've seen the biggest people in the world, and I ended up having a pain clinic and in Houston, and it was frequented by everybody, and if you were breathing, you could come in. And they're very, very rich people, poor people, security guards. It was very, very busy. And I did that by myself, and that was my, it's called Karma Yoga, and that was my service to humanity. And with the idea that Vishnudevananda said, serve those in front of you one at a time. And his teacher, Swami Shivananda, who wrote 300 books, who was very, very famous in India, who died in 1963, said, you have to serve them to their satisfaction. And that makes it interesting. So one day I looked, and I made $1.70 per person. So what would happen, I would make $40,000, and I would spend or give back to that business $35,000. Like my massage table was over $5,000. there was probably $15,000 worth of equipment into the office itself. And if you came to me, I would go over, take a class, learn how to do a technique or a system, and then come back and I would work on it in my office and basically gave it back to the people. So it was a big circle. And on the last 2 months of the year, I always brought the money back and maybe didn't spend any money, and then it broke itself even. And that's what I did for 12 years. And I retired from DuPont, and then I came up to Delaware to take care of my dad, and 3.5 days later he died. So I'm out into the world again, and Bharat just published, or is in publishing and printing a new book, and it's about having a yoga center for 40 years, and it's kind of amazing because there's yoga centers on every corner, but to have one for 40 years or to be associated with one for 40 years is a big deal. And everything that he saw in that 40 years, he's written down. And it's going to be a thick book, and they are printing it as we speak. So we're going to push that out into the world. And the realizations that go with something like that, where he'd go, he and his wife, and their children were involved in it, and they would open up the door every Sunday and have a satsang, which is like a spiritual couple hours, and they would chant, talk about philosophy. And when I first got into yoga in 1980, after I got out of the military, I wanted to go to yoga to meet girls. And I went to the University of Delaware, and he had a class there. And we're both a little overweight now, but at the time, he put both of his legs behind his head. And I said, I want to do that. And I was running and working out and those kind of things. And this little fat guy could do something I couldn't do. And then he got into class and he talked about reincarnation, karma, meditation, vegetarianism. And I disagree with everything. And then one day he said, well, you ought to come up to Wilmington where we have the Sunday night meeting. It's like a prayer meeting. And a couple months later I went, and they gave me some cartels, which are music. Basically, when I went in there, they asked me 2 minutes into this thing, start playing music with us. Well, I thought, wow, this is different. And his wife had the biggest smile. And if you find love somewhere, then you're attracted. And everything and his philosophy was, don't accept it or reject it, just listen to it. And what we learned later on in yoga, that anything that you're interested in, you'll pursue, and the things that you don't like about it, you just don't take it and you leave it there. So I started to read books, and then I would go up to New York City on a train, and if I found 4 or 5 Shivananda books, it was a big deal. And come back with him, and then we'd read them. And there was a person named A.B. Patel, and he was Indian, and he, myself and another person, Russ Apple, he's a yoga teacher in Wilmington at the Y, we would go over there and have class. And then they would feed us, and it was very, very nice people. And I pursued it, and then I ended up in the Correctional Institute in Smyrna as a volunteer, and I would go down there once a week and teach class. And it got to the point to where the inmates would bring up the keys, unlock the doors, I would come in, they'd lock the keys back, and then they would give the keys back to the jailer. And then after a while, you wonder who is running this place. And then I asked one of the guys, or he asked me, he said, how many people run this place? And I said, well, there's an warden. And he said, and then one of the other guys said, well, there's 2 people. There's an assistant warden. And when one of the inmates said, he says, he asked me, he said, how many inmates are there? And I said, well, there's 1,200, I think. He said, well, who runs the prison? So the 1,200 inmates run the prison. And then the guards used to come, this was in the 80s, from 82 to maybe 88 or so. The guards would come in, and we had relaxation at the end. It would be 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the yoga class, the physical class, which was the postures, and we did some speak-up time where everybody got to speak, and then we meditated, and then we did a breathing class, and then we did the postures, and then we had a relaxation. one of the guards would come into the class for the relaxation like 20 till 9. And he was real curious, and then he would come in and basically he would get his little nap in. And then there was another shift where the guard would sit outside. And I would go to the bathroom or something and come back and I said, you know, who's really running this place? So it was a good time, and you know, that side of the world I would have never seen, and it was very interesting. And one of the guys said one day, he said, all the criminals wear neckties. And I thought, well, okay. And I knew what everybody's crime was and how long they were in there, just to get an idea. And then afterwards, when they were done doing their time, I would take them out to lunch when they got out. I'd go up to Wilmington and get them, and just a few people it ended up being. And it was really interesting what happened. You know, God protects. One day, I got a phone call, and the message was on the phone, and I said, well, I'll answer it in the morning. And that was Friday night. Saturday night, I went and got my hair cut, and I said, well, remember, you got to get that phone call. And I looked into the newspaper, the journal, and I opened it up, and the guy that had called me was wanted for murder, and it was somehow there wasn't too much going on in Wilmington. It was on the front page. So what had happened that Friday night, he called me with the idea of, you know, some of those places in Wilmington you go to, and if you're white, it's either you're going through there or you're lost. And he wanted me to come up there and get him out of there, and because he had pushed his brother down the stairs and broke his neck and the guy was killed, so there's a manhunt out and they were looking for him. And so Shivananda protected, and go get your hair cut and look in the paper, and it's right there. And that's what happened. Some people we found jobs for. It was pretty wild, but it was a good time. And the other thing that I could say is that the guy that actually was wanted for murder, he came to our house, and there was 3 of us going to college at the time, and we had to upkeep the house, and he painted part of the house, and the guy did a perfect job. He didn't steal anything. He was just nice people. And I always remembered that. And in 1988, I went over to South Africa, and I lived with a Swami who printed yoga books. His name was Sahajananda, and he's still alive today. And he's the lion. And when he goes over to Rishikesh, which is where our headquarters is, they clean for 2 weeks before he comes over there. And he was kind of like my teacher, our teacher, Swami Vishnu Devananda, who died in 1993. They didn't like laziness. And I lived over there, and I worked right with him for 4 months, and I saw how organizations work and how people did things. And one day he said, like the things I'm going to tell you tonight, you can just put it into your own life and it's going to fit because it's universal. He said his little prayer, and then we'd go into the printing press. And he said his little prayer one day, and he looked over at me and he said, the only thing you have is God's name, or prayer, however you want to put it. And that's all you have. And how true was that? And things would break down in the printing press, and he was a school teacher when he started, and he fought, or just, he wasn't interested, or he didn't want to get committed for 10 years. And he has more notes from India, from Shivananda the master, than anybody else. And he said after 10 years, he said, I'm not going to send you any more letters. You have to get up and act. You have to start a center. He went to India. He didn't like the food. He didn't like the people. He didn't like the weather. He didn't like any of it. Shivananda says, you go back to South Africa and start your own. Now today, he has one of the biggest organizations. And one day he told me in the 80s, he goes, I'm tired of, with the elderly people in his congregation, I've fined them, I've corrected them, I've scolded them, I've kicked them out for a couple weeks as a punishment. Nothing's changed. I want to work with the little kids. And he has, if you go to Shivananda.org, or Divine Life Society South Africa, you can see his organization. And they have the biggest center out in the country for children. And everybody goes there. It's beautiful. Olympic-sized pool. It's absolutely gorgeous. And one day, he didn't allow any pictures of him. He didn't allow anything to be taped. And one day, I told the guy that did there was probably 800 people in the congregation for the Sunday night service. And I said, I'm leaving, but you got to tape this. And he said, well, I'm going to get in trouble. He said, no, you got to tape this. So he did. And the red light's on and the tapes are moving. Sahajananda was probably 25 feet away from us. He didn't hear me say to this guy, but he knew, and he said, this is for the people that are here. And the machine stopped, and the red light went off, and the audio guy's looking at it, and it didn't stop. It stopped, and it didn't start. And the guy looked at me like it's not running. So, okay. And I remember the lecture, and when the lecture was done and they always chant or they sing, the red lights came on and the cassette came back running. One day he talked to little kids, and they have their summer vacations to where they have 3 weeks off at a time. They don't take the whole summer off. And he had the boys there that week. And so they would come 8 to 4:30, and they would feed them their meals and everything. We walk into this room, there's 7 kids, and they had it to where they could ask Sahajananda a question and he would answer it. We walk into the room, he looked at one kid and said, you spelt the word such and such wrong. And he looked at his brother like, you show your little brother that that's misspelled. And we were just walking on our way there, and I forget the word, and the older child, probably 2 years older than him, looked at it, it was misspelled, and